It was widely known among the Scottish people that the Sidhe could be dangerous creatures. It was not wise to meddle with them, and commonly leaving them a wide berth was the safest action. On the other hand, some craved the knowledge and the power of the Fae, and if they came face to face with the great gods of old, they would happily enter into a bargain or take their opportunity to win a wish. Many times, these boons granted to mortal men would come in the form of prophecy. But dealing with the Sidhe is never straightforward, and the intent to change the future can often cause the undesired one to come true. It is in this latter category that we find Hugh of the Little Head. During the 14th century, the great clan of MacLean had become a dominant force in the Western Isles. The chief at the time was Lachlan the Wily of Duart. But today's tale more concerns his brother, Hector the Stern, who ruled over the second most powerful branch of the family, the MacLeans of Lochbuie. Hector had a son whom he called Hugh of the Little Head. This name, it was believed, referred to Hugh's constant foolishness, and although he was the son of the Lochbuie chief, there was not much respect for Hugh within the clan. His most useful action so far had been the arranged marriage between himself and a somewhat older woman from the clan of MacDougall. This union would strengthen the bond between the clans, a favourable outcome for both chiefs, although not quite so favourable for young Hugh. His wife had earned the title of the Black Heron of the MacDougalls due to her domineering and harsh personality. She did not suffer fools lightly, and our fool suffered greatly at the hands of his new wife. She would pick and peck at him morning till night. The chief of Lochbuie had been a great warrior in his time, but now the weariness of age lay upon him, and Hector had grown old. The Black Heron was determined that Hector would leave the clan castle and all the lands to her husband, and not any of his cousins. Day after day, Hugh of the Little Head was pushed by his wife into confronting his father, and demanding he make it known that Hugh would be the next chief of the MacLeans of Lochbuie. Old Hector merely listened to the boy's nonsense, and waved him away with "We shall see what time brings." But this was no good for Hugh's wife. Again and again she pushed the man to confront his father, and on one day Hector could stand it no more, and his voice rose in anger at his son. During the shouting, Hugh drew his sword and cracked the old man in the head with the flat of the blade, before storming off in anger. Hector was furious with his son. He had all but challenged him to a duel. But he would not fight his own child. So the old man sent word to his brother Lachlan to ask for his advice. But Lachlan was unable to contain his rage and fury at the situation. Whether nephew or not, Hugh had greatly disrespected the clan, and Lachlan issued a challenge to Hugh of the Little Head. He was to bring himself, and any men loyal to him, to meet the MacLeans of Duart on the field of battle. Hugh, again pushed by his wife, gladly accepted the challenge, and rounded up the meagre fools that would follow the Little Head into battle. Yet his wife, knowing that this skirmish may end with Hugh as chief of all the MacLeans, sent word to her father, and soon a small army of MacDougalls had arrived to aid Hugh in his great challenge. On the eve of battle, Hugh left his camp and walked in the woods, hoping to clear his head. As he approached a small stream, the man in great shock spotted a woman washing clothes. A sight not unusual to the man, but her visage was far from common. The tall, shriveled creature had a large hooked nose, and its rough, calloused hands were tipped with sharp claws. Hugh knew the creature was not of this world. It had to be the Benia, the fairy washerwoman who portends death. She was rinsing the bloody shirts of those who will soon die. Hugh, with some apprehension, asked the haunting woman if his shirt was among those she washed. A slow but unmistakable nod was the answer. Hugh called again, "Please, O washerwoman, what can I do to avoid this fate?" The skull-like face of the spectre turned towards the man and spoke in an eerie, unpleasant tone. "There is only one thing that will save you from your fate. If on the morning you are given butter for your porridge unprompted, you will survive the battle." Hugh was not happy with the answer, and cursed the washerwoman as a fool. He called back that he and his men will not have porridge in the morning, and by that her prophecy will be easily bested. With this, Hugh of the Little Head returned to camp and fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, Hugh and his eager followers all sat in a great tent, waiting to receive breakfast. Hugh watched as his servants brought out great bowls of warm porridge for the warriors about to fight. But before they could pick up a spoon, Hugh ordered his men to wait. They sat in silence for some hours as the porridge cooled. Then, with no food in their stomachs, the men rose and readied for battle. As Hugh left the tent, he shouted towards his wife, "The servants are terrible. We wait for hours, and no butter was brought for our porridge. So we will have no porridge, and win the battle nonetheless." A great battle then erupted on the hillside. Swords clatter and clash all round, and in the centre, atop his horse, was Hugh of the Little Head. He galloped straight towards his uncle, with sword drawn. Chief Lachlan picked up his great claymore, and as the horse passed him by, he removed the little head from Hugh's body, which happily continued its journey, slumped upon the back of the animal. The MacLeans of Duart were quickly victorious on the battlefield, and Hugh's struggle for chiefdom was over, and so was his life, or it would have been if the little head had been less of a fool. The curse given to the washerwoman was far from forgotten, and Hugh was said to live on, being granted his wish to survive the battle. But now he was doomed to an eternal cursed life as a spectral, headless horseman. From this point onwards, the story seems to split into many tales. It was believed by some that whenever a member of the Lochbuie MacLeans died, the horseman is seen, or the clattering of hooves can be heard in the distance. Some tell that the Headless Horseman will come to claim the souls of the dying himself. In some versions, this is seen more positively, with Headless Hugh guiding his family members safely to the other side, while others claim the horseman arrives to kill those whose time upon our world is up. Hugh was not contained to any specific area, and the spectral horror was said to be seen all over Scotland, and on many occasions in Ireland. It has even been suggested that Hugh of the Little Head led to the tales of the Irish Dullahan, a sinister fey rider whom carries his decapitated head under his arm as he hunts the souls of the damned all over Ireland. Although I will say that this could very well be the other way round, and the Dullahan inspired the tale of Scotland's Headless Horseman. I am not sure which came first, and I am less acquainted with Irish folklore. But either way, it was a tale very much believed in both lands. In a further tale of Scotland's Headless Horseman, Hugh was said to take a liking to one of his descendants, and would commonly be seen with the young man riding upon the back of his spectral horse. The wicked horseman would do no ill to this man, and more than that, he was said to converse with him and portend the fate of the clan's successors, which according to legend have all come to pass, although it is not mentioned what exactly these omens were. In a story with some similarities to the last, Hugh was said to arrive on the blackest of nights atop his spectral steed, in order to take the life of a great MacLean warrior. But when the Headless Horseman arrived, the young warrior was standing by a birch tree, which he had secretly tied himself to. When the Headless Horseman reached down to pull the man upon his horse and ferry him to the other side, the warrior would not move, even under the immense unworldly strength that the horseman now possessed. The tree twisted and cracked, but did not give way, and for the first time ever, the horseman was thrown from the saddle. The headless figure hit the ground hard, and his ghostly steed disappeared into the night, leaving the panicked Hugh to chase the beast. Some say it took the horseman 3 months to recapture his horse. Others claim it took years, and during that time, no MacLeans would die. But either way, the warrior had cheated death, and lived for many more years before the horseman returned to finish his ghoulish task. One tale, which is still well remembered today, happened on the Isle of Mull in the early 1900s. On the island, there lived 3 old sisters of the clan MacLean: Lilias, Jane, and Marianne. At that time, they all resided in the same cottage, and lived quite happily. On one cold winter's evening, while the local doctor, Duncan MacDonald, was on his daily rounds, he went to visit the women. While the doctor was being welcomed inside, all of the sisters and the man heard the eerie clatter of hooves on the short road leading to the cottage. But when looking down the track, there was nothing to be seen. Lilias immediately called, "That's Hugh of the little head, and he's come for me." The very next day she was dead, but the odd tale does not end there. 1 year later, Jane died within the house, and those that lived there to care for the woman distinctly remember hearing the sound of hooves on the track outside, but no visitor ever arrived. Some even claimed that there was odd ghostly happenings within the house, such as items going missing or moving on their own. One told that for weeks leading up to the death, she had heard the rattling of bridle chains, which instantly stopped on the day Jane passed. The third sister, Marianne, did not wish to stay in the cottage anymore, and believed it to be cursed. She moved to a cottage by the name of Muircroft in 1902, and there she died after contracting an illness. Once more, the carers had heard the clattering of hooves on the very night the woman passed. Those in the surrounding area even told that the terrifying headless spectre had been seen that very night, galloping through the fields near the cottage. Is this pure coincidence, or did the spectre of Hugh MacLean return to ferry their souls to the other side? Another occasion when the ghost of Hugh MacLean was said to have been quite active was just before the beginning of the Second World War. Many in the area of Lochbuie told of the sounds of a horse galloping by their homes at night. Yet in the morning, the people would search for tracks or hoofprints, but there was none to be found. Everyone grew fearful of the omen, and anxiously awaited the horseman's return. A few days later, news reached the village that an old woman with ties to the MacLean chief had died, and for the next few weeks, none of the older locals dared venture outside during the night, lest they should come upon the headless spectre galloping between Lochbuie and the MacLean mausoleum at Laggan. A final tale was recorded by the then chief of the MacLeans, Murdoch Gillian. As he reached the end of his days, the old chief began to hear a horse galloping during the night. But not being a man of great superstition, MacLean believed it to be a local riding the horse at night, or a horse that had escaped its stable. So one day, after hearing the galloping hooves for many nights, the chief asked his retainers to search the area behind the house and find the man or the horse at fault. The whole day, the men searched up and down the field, but they found nothing, not even hoofprints. Some days later, still plagued by the galloping horse, the chief became gravely ill, and now bedridden, called for the family doctor. the doctor arrived a few days later, along with a day and night nurse, all of whom took residence at Lochbuie House, so they could care for the old chief. One evening, while MacLean was sitting up in bed, having his dinner, the man expired. By the time the doctor got to the room, the old chief was long gone. It was now the duty of the nurses to prepare the body for burial, but during the course of their work, something terrible had given them a fright, and the pair rushed downstairs in a state of utter horror and refused to return to their duties, and also refused to tell anyone what they had witnessed. Later that evening, an atmosphere of dread descended upon the entire house. All the residents had gathered in the dining room, fearing for their lives, as odd noises and strange sounds were heard everywhere. Each bang of a door or creak of a floorboard would send icy shivers racing up the spines of the haunted house guests. As the sun began to rise, the sleepless crowd heard the front door slam shut, and the sound of hooves galloping away. It would seem that the Headless Horseman had come to take the soul of the late MacLean chief. The tale of Hugh of the Little Head is a well-known one in Scotland, and there are many more stories of him haunting various castles and places, especially upon the night that the chief of the clan MacLean dies. If you would like to hear these tales, please let me know in the comments, and I can tell you more of Scotland's Headless Horseman. Thank you for listening, and a special thank you to my patrons for supporting the channel and allowing me to make these videos. The first appendice I have for you this week begins with the main character of the tale himself, Hugh of the Little Head. Although his name is spelt E-W-E-N, it is not pronounced Ewen. Although some Ewens do spell their name in this fashion, it is actually a derivation of the Gaelic name Ewen, which is commonly translated to Hugh, but is actually pronounced Hugh. But for the sake of this video, I chose to pronounce it as the common English version, by which Hugh is best known nowadays. On a very similar tangent to that of the Doulahan, Hugh of the Little Head is also said to have been the inspiration behind Washington Irving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, or the Headless Hessian of the Hollow. Hugh of the Little Head was also a tale that travelled across the world. When many of the Highlanders were forced by poverty to leave their homeland and begin a new Scotland, or Nova Scotia as it is now known, they would take many of these tales with them. The headless form of Hugh even made it to Canada in order to return the MacLean spirits back to Scotland before they went to the other side. Although the Canadian version of the tale, and the Sleepy Hollow one for that matter, has more in common with a slightly later telling of the tale of Hugh of the Little Head, one in which Hugh is to challenge his brother in a duel for leadership of the clan. On the evening before this battle, Hugh visits a local witch, who is much feared by the locals, yet is known for her power. He asks the witch if he will be victorious, and she tells him that he will win the fight if his wife gives him food unasked for on the morning of the duel. Again, his wife did not give him any food, and he died on the battlefield due to his wounds. As he died while fasting, his body would not leave the land, and he would ride for eternity on the very horse he rode that day. Not quite as interesting as the original, if you ask me. I like the jab at the fae and the penalty he received for shunning the old gods. I hope you all enjoyed this tale of the possible origins of the Headless Horseman myth, and I hope you will all join me again next time for more tales from Scottish folklore. Slàinte mhath.